Arts trend, culture, consumerism. Are we choosing between progress and the planet? Beauty and a healthy climate doesn't only mean living in an untouched world without the impressions of humankind. By now, a lot of us are aware of the concerns at stake when it comes to climate change. It is clearly evident that the problems of environmental sustainability are significant, urgent, complex, and to a high degree the product of human activity. Although I'm sure it will still be relevant to draw attention to further environmental issues and predicaments as they arise, in this video I would like to focus more particularly on what can be done as artists and individuals to continue to think about and address more solutions and outcomes in the realm of creative work. From my own ideas to initiate this investigation, as well as what I have learnt along the way, I have found that sharing personal constructs about climate change can elicit a strong motivation to act, and that collaborative actions could achieve meaningful progress. That's why if you disagree or have your own knowledge and understanding, I would love to hear from you in the comments box below. If you feel up to it, why not create your own image or video and add to the discussion by tagging climate art debate. Things will always be worn out, broken and need replacing, but when it comes to progress, it has been stated that the days of abundant resources are over, and that if we are going to combat climate change, we need to rethink about the ways in which we have been progressing. There is evidence that change is happening in positive ways, but it's also evidence that capitalism as we know it and the destruction that comes with it is still continuing. A huge contribution to this is the continuation of new trends and quick-to-dispose waste consumer culture. This fast-paced change dynamic I will look into further in this video and what can be done to consider and rethink about what we are doing to contribute. During this investigation, I'll be looking at trends in art, trends in consumerism, and trends in culture, and explain how they work and impact the environment. I'll also be looking at the role of trends in society and if they play an integral part in our functioning and quality of life. I'll also like to consider the role of trends in art and in the rest of society to continue to create unhealthy progression and then also positive change. I will try and envision how some of these themes may change in the future, but much of this will be based on personal knowledge and opinion. I will also be looking into what kinds of ideas have been and are currently being explored when it comes to climate change and environmentalism in the visual arts. Within each profession and area of expertise, we can develop and use knowledge of change to combat climate-threatening issues in various fields, both individually and together. New knowledge can be shared cross-disciplines to address problems and find solutions in new and innovative ways. By looking into the arts, culture, trends and consumerism, I aim to work cross-disciplinary to target the problems that artists are faced with when they think of our own practices in more environmentally friendly ways and how we can envision the future and move forward. By looking at culture and the role it plays in adding to and addressing climate change, I hope to recognise the contribution of human experience, views and behaviour and how they play a part in identifying challenges and adapting to strategies and solutions in living in new, more environmentally friendly scenarios. When dealing with notions of the future, there is a fair bit of crystal balling. I can only share my opinions based on my own knowledge and what can be predicted by trajectories, patterns of behaviour and scientific evidence. How the future will actually eventuate is unknown to me, but I would like to share what I can do to help. Hopefully it will be an interesting and fulfilling journey to reach a more environmentally friendly and stabilised climate condition and new way of life, even though there may be challenges along the way. But who knows? Usually whenever anyone has tried to predict or foresee the future without facts and evidence, we get it considerably wrong. When acting, maybe it's better to look at what we can do today and in the near future to practically move forward based on what we have learned from some cold hard facts and what is realistic to dream up. Trends. The definition of trends in the Oxford Dictionary is a general direction in which a situation is changing or developing, a fashion or a topic that is the subject of many posts on a social media website or application within a short period of time. I also see it as ideas or things that numerous people jump on as being a good idea or want to be part of. That is the exciting part of trends, isn't it? What about the force of progress and how collective participation could propel us into a very environmentally troubled predicament? A concern of mine is that there could be mindless and careless trends that a lot of people jump on without thinking of the environmental implications it creates. People may think that they are doing the right thing, but they may not have the insight as to how things are really going on behind the scenes. I don't expect to control this kind of trend from occurring, but hopefully the impacts can be reduced. There may be phases and things we have to go through to reach more environmentally friendly predicaments. We may have to try things out and see how they work, as well as follow the facts and learn from what has worked previously. We may get things wrong, but can learn from them. The problem with some trends is that trends created to encourage consumption are detrimental to the environment and trap consumers in increasingly rapid cycles of purchase, discard, and replacement. This may be something we could work through to overcome depending on how things pan out in the near future. Vintage, historical, and reoccurring and repurposed trends offer an opportunity to reuse what we already have, and they can offer a freshness and brightness with a kind of added nostalgia. Though not just about nostalgia, old cultural material can be changed in meaning over time as it is gone from being newly relevant to out of fashion to forgotten about to then resurrected and relevant once again with new life and meaning. One recent example is the reappropriation of white pearl necklaces by fashion labels, adding them to a gangster male aesthetic. They look regal, like the male models they wear them are comfortable with their feminine side, and as though they bought them in an expensive auction from a deceased estate or even stolen them from your grandma. Anew, they are charged with a new meaning and relevant for their remembrance and new use. Another contemporary reoccurring and repurposed trend is the cottagecore movement. Old 80s and 90s material items based on themes of pleasant rural life have now been reappropriated as hip, edgy, kitsch, tacky and colourful sought after vintage gems that have become somewhat less conservative and humorous as they are adopted into new lives. It appears that the kitsch and tacky appeal has strengthened with time. What I've observed is that not all material from the past is reused. It is the creme de la creme of what is relevant today is reused, whether it is for practical, stylistic or humorous interest. Then also, of course, completely new decor and fashion is recreated, or new variations on the same themes are created brand new. Whether this approach is a good move for environmental sustainability, I am unsure. But if it means consumers preferring the new items than the originals, and they are not more sustainably produced, then this could be an issue. Maybe it defeats the purpose of the resurrection in the first place. Unfortunately, I didn't find much on studies and information on the destructive influence of trends on environmental sustainability, but what I know from my own experience and observations that go along with all the questions I have, like, can sustainability be a trend in itself to help us adjust and propel us forward in positive ways? How much do art trends influence consumer trends, like for instance paintings that match the furniture, decor and the things we wear? Do we all need change to feel we can start anew and stop us getting down or feeling stagnant and stuck? Maybe we can get better at what we explore more in depth, finding nuances within what we already have been exploring. Then that's still new material, isn't it? It's not like we can completely give that up, maybe just reduce how much we create that isn't pro-environmental. Who initiates these changes in trends? High fashion designers play a part in my eyes, as well as fast fashion designers. They have to keep things moving from season to season to keep the business afloat and to keep making profits. I'm sure this happens in all areas of the consumer industry. Some items stand the test of time, some go out of fashion. What happens when you wear an item that goes out of fashion? Do products go into storage before they come back into fashion again? Maybe the closets of those that find it represents the joys of their past that they can hold on to. Enough questions, here are some more facts. Due to trends passing much faster than items of clothing are worn out, throwaway fashion now consigns millions of tons of clothing to landfill. Decaying fibres produce toxic gases and leachate liquid waste in landfill, which contaminates both surface and groundwater sources. Also, while natural fibres are considered compostable, surprisingly, as woolen garments decompose, they produce large amounts of ammonia as well as methane. On art. Art for centuries has been viewed as the catharsis of nations. The culture and socio-economic dynamics of an area or an era are seen defined in the works of artists of that place and time. These works of art define that era, as does the popular works of today will freeze our current identity for generations to come. Societal and cultural experts believe that what will be remembered from this era we are in now, or possibly overcoming, is that in human endeavours we will be known for the environmental impacts we have imposed on the planet. On another note, in London I heard that when creatives become known to inhabit an area, that area becomes trendy, then it quickly becomes a sought-after area in real estate by people with money, which raises the value of the property prices drastically. That is one example of the value of artists and our influence in society. When I mention art, I'm talking about the visual arts, or people who make art, artisans, pieces, and other handmade goods with thought and deliberation. In this video, I would like to address what has been done or could be done with art when considering or addressing the environment and sustainability. But over to design. Universities are looking at teaching and approaching design in new, more holistic ways. Designers are now considering the role of the design process in each stage of an object's production, from source material to design production to use and then to disposal, reuse, recycle. To create green benefits, sustainable design is approached to rethink the aims, criteria and strategies of design production. Designers are now considering long-term material, environmental and social investments in the products they produce. Whether this new approach and investment is applied in much of the in-industry production yet is unknown to me. But I'm sure that with that knowledge and experience, designers will resort to more sustainable options when the choice can be made at the time of making the decision. Within the field of art, we have environmental art, also known as ecological art. Environmental art evolved from land art in the 1990s. Rather than disrupt nature, environmental art's aim is to work in harmony with it and deals with themes such as growing, flowering, erosion, moulding and decay. Environmental artists use materials found in nature such as stone, soil, sand, flowers, branches, ice and water in their works. They work and exhibit outside in nature or bring the materials into new settings. Viewers are provoked to become more curious or rethink how they view the world around them by seeing how a site is transformed or by being pointed to what is already there. Environmental art has and can be used to promote pro-environmental behaviour by stimulating imagination, reflection and discussion in innovative and unexpected ways, and seeks to investigate our human relationship with the environment through embedding artistic practice within it. In the 20th century, alongside rising global concerns surrounding the state of the environment's health and our impact as humans upon it, many artists started creating works in collaboration with the physical world to draw attention to ecological issues as well as our relationships and contribution to them. As a more defined concept, environmental art has gained more traction since the 1990s. For some time now, it's been on trend and relevant to make environpolitical statements through art. This can be achieved through environmental art or various other approaches. Through art that is itself about the environment or art that is self-consciously environmental. Other ways artists can make a change within their creative practices could include thinking of ways to use and reuse materials collected from past shows, using materials sourced close to home, give a new life and form to something old or reused, using materials low in toxicity or making sure toxins are disposed of correctly, exploring ideas that address everything from climate change to pollution to consumerism and biodiversity, using other more natural products, conservation and social impact projects, keeping up to date with new environmentally friendly options and products, dealing with waste more responsibly in the home, studio and workplace. In other areas of art, innovative solutions are being created, such as the new revisited and refreshed terrazzo trend, making something beautiful and or functional from waste, reclaimed or recycled materials, biodegradable materials, using wood or rubbish, disposed of and or reused materials, using new or familiar eco-friendly options, performance art, using less materials, digital art, ideas, concepts, sound art and spoken word, considering if your work is ephemeral or permanent, process-based art, found objects, community arts projects, creating awareness, addressing political or moral statements, art inspiring thought and creativity, the trend of artists drawing and illustrating solely in digital form, using plants. Why not consider buying materials secondhand off the net or using up the materials left over in someone else's shed? During an Australian Environmental Art Festival, studies were conducted to see whether the art and discussions addressed within the festival promoted viewers and participants to change their behaviour in regards to becoming more environmentally friendly and share awareness. 41% of participants were recorded to state that they would change their behaviour in the future. The festival was recorded as having a positive impact on creating further awareness, education and responsibility to those who participated. These significant results were achieved through creating and fostering environmental attitudes such as optimism, a sense of responsibility, a belief that the individual had the power to have an effect or influence by demonstrating options of a community that acts on the environment with social norms that are positive and environmentally orientated. Why stick to art alone? Why not get creative and explore some cross-disciplinary approaches? Today, artists and designers are reconsidering their practices by collaborating with scientists, engineers, environmentalists, etc., to find potential solutions by making steps to save our planet. By working with science, creativity can be used to repurpose materials, such as Betty Beaumont's work of creating an artificial reef made from stacked blocks reformed out of coal waste. It is interesting to consider how an artistic practice can be integrated with construction, environmental science, and how artists can work together with scientists. Not all art has to be addressing direct solutions and commenting on the dilemmas at stake. It could be as simple as considering your own practices by becoming aware as possible of environmental implications of materials used and disposing correctly toxic and other materials, choosing less packaging and recycling, etc. Here is another question. What would be the impact of environmental restrictions on materials on the quality of art generated? Would it restrict the potential for realising ideas? Indeed, would it be morally right to restrict artists to only environmentally friendly products if it meant that fewer people would be inspired to invent and create their own work? Is it possible that it's worth wasting a small amount of materials to keep our society creative and inventive? Keep traditions and disciplines alive? Maybe restrictions won't happen, but if they did, I'm sure issues would be raised when and if the time comes. There are fewer toxic materials and material alternatives available. As the demands for more alternative products increases, companies will introduce more solutions to the demands as demands create supply. Even the EU has implemented a ban on a group of toxic materials in art supplies, and several major papers and canvas suppliers have introduced eco-friendly paper. Today we are seeing so much more of these changes within businesses happening. It's great. As artists, do we have to conform to a cultural demographic to become more environmentally friendly? Art is a movement with many contributing types of people from varying backgrounds. Though through art we participate and are influenced by one another. I guess art has its own cultural vocabulary within itself, which may change as and if we become more environmentally conscious in the future. Though this may be changing, artists and museums throw away some work after they have been featured for a while. Maybe we can get into the habit of working within our community to think about how these materials can be reused by one another. Or just getting used to planning like the designers are, the stages of material use during our art production journey. Here are some further questions. What is the percentage of consumption of art or other consumption of cultural influence by art and the fads we create and participate in? How much materials are we going through to create or participate in these ideas we share? Culture. It is believed today that to find real solutions to address climate change impacts and biodiversity conservation, it is necessary to gain knowledge and insight from the social sciences. Looking at culture more specifically, let's begin with a quick description of what culture is and its features. Culture should be regarded as a set of distinctive spiritual, material, intellectual, and emotional features of society or a group, and that it encompasses, in addition to art, literature, lifestyles, ways of living together, value systems, traditions, and beliefs. Culture is also seen as a dynamic mix of symbols, beliefs, languages, and practices that people create, not a fixed thing or entity governing humans. Though studies have been done to explain how pro-environmental behaviour can be influenced by personality and personal attitudes, culture is also seen as the context in which responses are generated and change happens. Cultural systems of meaning shape the way that people interpret climate change and provide a historical and socio-cultural context within which impacts are experienced and responses are generated. Thus, the structure of daily life that tends to be taken for granted or seen as natural are both understood as the product of culture and also subject to human capacities to affect change over time. So it's these mechanisms of learned behaviour that we use to go about our lives that need to be addressed and reconfigured. To identify the mechanisms of change, we first have to acknowledge that ideas of nature are socially constructed, so that there are contexts in which respect and disrespect are formed and exist. To challenge and change current perceptions and actions, this can be assisted by offering guidance, new values and tools to be used. By finding new practices and solutions that are modifications to adopt and integrate into current existing lives and livelihoods, no matter our cultural background. This means that current and existing cultures don't need to be scrapped at all to create change. New ways can be integrated into existing ways. To motivate and continue motivating new norms, conversation needs to be had. Authority needs to be aware and involved, and the appearance of options, discussions, etc. in people's lives will play a role in encouraging pro-environmental behaviour. By being aware of the consequences of their actions, people are encouraged to alter behaviour based on personal norms and feelings of responsibility. Culture, although transmitted over generations, isn't resilient to change. While cultural traditions are known to be resilient through time, it is important to recognise the normality of change and adaptation to prevailing social and environmental conditions. to the extent we might conceive culture as being actively made by each generation that is constructed by human agents rather than being produced solely by a body of encompassing traditions. This proof that culture evolves and adapts over time, and we can become conscious of our own actions and implications to create change. Neither Indigenous nor non-Indigenous Australia is a monolithic category, monolithic being of an organisation or system, large, powerful, invisible, and slow to change. In the 19th and early 20th century, people were either unaware of the damage that their activity was doing to the environment, considered it insignificant, or assumed that it was their right to exploit environmental resources. The rise of the Industrial Revolution increased a waste culture and increased the severity of pollution, etc. Traditionally, modern ecosystem management has been driven by a scientific or conservation ethic. This has sometimes led to conflict between culture and conservation, but more recently there has been a strong recognition that effective ecosystem management can only be achieved through a better understanding and integration of the relationship between communities and nature. The harsh reality is that most societies view and manage ecosystems by strategies implemented by long-held cultural beliefs that have been long existing in their societies, some as old as millennia. As this is now raised for discussion, along with the threat of climate change, old ways are now beginning to be changed. Students and professionals are exploring new options to explore new angles and consider every rule in the book. Today, in a period now described as Anthropocene, where humans dominate the planet in an explosion of population and the use of much of the world's resources, degradation of a disproportionate portion of ecosystem resources from both land and ocean are favoured over ecological resilience. This period in human history is what is driving climate change and dramatic changes in our ecosystem. Different human cultures have had varying effects on their environments. Some cultures, particularly hunter-gatherer and small-scale agriculture societies, have little environmental impact. Urban and industrial societies have the greatest effect on the environment, using great amounts of resources to fuel their activity. All humans affect their environments, but within societies, people with different lifestyles create different kinds of environmental impacts. The practice of agriculture itself changes ecosystems. In most cases, land must be cleared, removing habitat for animals and decreasing natural plant diversity. In Australia, many aspects of the environment have been challenged by colonisation. It has also drawn in many migrants from various countries around the world, bringing with it different backgrounds and cultural knowledge. The predominant relationship to land amongst British settlers is typically characterised as having historically been based on commodification and domestication of landscapes for largely economic purposes. Yet, as with similar countries, Australia has seen the rise of an influential environmental movement that sought to challenge the dominant view that conquering nature is necessary for social and economic production of wealth. Aboriginal people conceive species and landscape as an intimately connected set of phenomena with both material resources for practical usage and an encompassing sentient spirituality. Thus, while Western science considers fish as a resource to be managed sustainably, Aboriginal people view fish and their harvest not only as a significant source of food, but also as part of a wider system of interconnected socio-physical relationships and identity. Other nationalities' approaches to their environment differs, which grow out of their own cultural experience in their countries of origin, as well as experiencing new understandings in Australia. For example, Macedonia and Vietnamese communities have a different relationship with their national park environments. Vietnam's high population density and subsistence agricultural base leads to people having an understanding of landscape as being embedded with social relations, personal experiences, and human engagement. For the Macedonians, the landscape is also an intensely socialised place that is peopled. This is different from the English come colonised Australians' view of nature as wilderness, as other and out there. For both Vietnamese and Macedonian Australians, a cultural history involving the daily integration of people with the environment in village or rural life settings poses different relationships to nature. Europeans also see environmental issues as out there, in remote areas and distant places. Humans and nature are seen as separate entities. This mindset is highly problematic as it diverts attention to environmental issues as elsewhere. On a local scale, attention in research has been drawn to investigating ecologies in urban environmental cultures. Cultural geographer Kay Anderson has pointed out that it is the suburban backyard that people perhaps unwillingly make their more routine interventions in nature. Suburbs have become ecosystems of their own, with animals and plant life. Native plantings provide habitat links to surrounding bushland. Having this kind of relationship with nature is at the forefront of notions of urban ecologies and how to move forward. According to some studies, some experts believe that human societies consist of characteristics that are either masculine or feminine. Masculinity is the degree of tough values of assertiveness, success and competition, and is the role of the man, and the role of the feminine in society is the level of tender values of quality of life, maintaining warm personal relationships, caring for weak, and is more associated with women's roles. I think that what they are trying to say is having environmental concerns is a more feminine value. Whether this is a male or female harnessing and pursuing these values is up to them. There are still patterns of social interaction within which individuals prefer to live their lives. Maybe it's not about changing these too much, it's more about becoming savvier about it. Hopefully enough people realise they too are responsible for change. So remembering to recycle your champagne bottles or consider buying closer to home amongst other things. When it comes to voting, values and beliefs critically influence policy preferences, and religion can play a part in this. The benefits of modern democracy developed along with capitalism. This is an example of a positive development. So within democracy, an overall consensus in politics is needed to make large decisions, and different political parties are required to have equal opportunity to express their opinions. This occurs in countries that are egalitarian, that is, believing in or based on the principle that all people are equal and deserve equal rights and opportunities. Countries that are hierarchist and egalitarian, hierarchist being a system in which members of an organisation or society are ranked according to relative status or authority, are more likely to engage in the political process. Fatalists who believe that people cannot change the way events will happen and that events, particularly negative ones, cannot be avoided, as well as hierarchists, they believe that what will be will be. I don't think that by adopting more environmentally friendly behaviour that those that believe in what will be need to change. If the rest of society is adopting more environmentally friendly approaches, they can still think and preserve beliefs that are valuable to them as well as join in. Consumerism. Before I get into the negative effects of consumerism, let's explore some positives. Since the Industrial Revolution, many innovations and solutions have been invented, produced, and made available for all. In the West, capitalism and the development of consumer culture has done a lot to rise the standards of living for everyone. When you hear about how people used to live before, you wondered how they survived. Modern comforts such as hot water, plumbing, central heating, electric lights, and transport, etc. are all the result of developments in relation to what has occurred since the Industrial Revolution. With this in mind, it is also important to consider the loss of cottage industry and artisan professions due to industry developments, and that their workers really did have to fight for their own quality of life. Within modern consumer culture, the literature tends to focus on 5 main waves of transformation. the first two being of early stages of global import-export strategies, and the last three being of which have over the last century developed the system or infrastructure of consumer culture we see today, including that of resource extraction, manufacturing, transportation, provision, information, and waste. These systems, although with positives also, have been developed to facilitate mass consumption in its present form. From about the 1980s, a period developed named the Great Acceleration, which is or was a period of increased rates of consumption at a global scale. What came with it was results in dramatic rise in greenhouse gas emissions. More volume of goods appeared on the market, including more quickly distributed single-use products. Buy more, disposable, upgrade, keep up. These were some of the mantras used to market these wares. What caused the Great Acceleration was that it was driven primarily by three integrating motors: an economic motor which drives technological change, a structural motor that results in a continuous expansion of complexity, and a psycho-social or cultural motor which is termed a eudaimonic impulse, or a desire for the good life. This desire for the good life, or a seemingly better one, is a strategy of escapism. However, as more choices appear, there is less time to enjoy them, so more time-saving devices or routines must be adopted to get there faster and more efficiently. And you could realise that the top you bought for a more confident and happier version of you is now out of date and you barely wore it. Let's take a moment to think about this conundrum. There is the desire for the good life and to temporarily escape and gain a relief that consumerism can provide. There is the now current understanding that greater durability and retention rates would evidently benefit the environment. How are we going to work through that one? Face it, we like buying stuff. Consumerism has previously been a cyclic phenomenon that is a quest for the latest and best. Mainstream consumerism has an inbuilt chronological obsolescence because it promotes short-term, detached and unsustainable relations between people and their disposable artifacts. The lifespan of potentially durable goods can be shortened through various kinds of obsolescence, technical obsolescence being one of them. Since repair can involve additional delays and added expense, this type of rapid replacement soon becomes the easiest and safest option, especially for electronics. In European countries, where the general cultural consensus is more established, people live more settled and slower-paced lives, more directed towards enjoyment than keeping up and trying to get there quicker. Where is unknown. Maybe it's a drive to escape human suffering which we all endure as human beings to an extent and is part of our lives. Maybe today Western countries with the capitalist drive can begin to slow down and develop, making their lives and what they have richer than the more shallow, superficial and quickly changing conversion-driven life based on the consumeristic drive of, gee, that's a good idea, better adopt that. I think I'm reinventing myself again, feeling of relief. Here are some positive changes and solutions. Companies and product designers are growing in number in now factoring in environmental solutions in decision making and the products they produce. Today it is great to see so many new, more environmentally friendly options appearing on the market, especially when it comes to alternatives to plastic packaging, etc. New ideas about an economy of contribution have been formed and are being tested as a new industrial model based on more socially orientated methodology to production and consumption. This is also referred to as the sharing economy, cooperative capitalism, hipster economics, or indie capitalism, and involves more artisans. Some people believe that the contributory model is the inevitable successor of traditional consumerism. By contrast, the economy of contribution promotes a sense of social and cultural interconnectedness because consumers have some degree of direct input into their design and or production of the artifacts they consume and spaces they use. Some people believe that consumer-led capitalism is the answer, but if big businesses come up with great solutions too, especially if their designers are qualified and addressing problems also. So perhaps modern-day capitalism will morph and evolve into something else based on problems and solutions as they arise. A note for those who are totally against capitalism is that these new and innovative options and solutions go against Marxism accounts of capitalism being irreconcilable with social objectives and community well-being. It is probably important to point out that the types of people initiating these incentives are those who care about society, males and females alike. A great and successful introduction into the new contributory economy is the Renew Newcastle scheme, which has since spread Australia-wide. Renew Newcastle is both a non-for-profit organisation and approach to the problems of urban, cultural and social decay. By using buildings not in use and shop fronts, small emerging businesses, artisans and artists are housed in the vacant spaces for little to no cost on short-term leases. RN's artisans are promised to not compete with local adjacent businesses and must conform to the definition of a creative cultural enterprise, such as RN's operations cannot be positioned as a straightforward alternative to mainstream consumerism and urbanism. RN's simultaneous resistance to and operational reliance upon the urban and the global spread and success of capitalism, as well as capitalism's tendency to create abandonment and decay, has left opportunity for new approaches. This DIY urbanism is a great example of finding innovative solutions to problems and altering the system from within. Consumerism has been defined as a way of life and a state of mind, and an individual's way to self-development, self-realization and self-fulfillment. This could be a positive if more of the destructive sides of consumerism were altered. With the availability of abundant resources and oil for fuels, chemicals and plastics, the movement of consumerism may be hard to change. The take, make, use, lose approach of consumerism has to change if we are going to fight climate change and continue living on this planet. What about the appeal of the shiny and new? Actions and solutions. Various forms of intentional opposition to acceleration are now being considered as relevant options to notice. Older, slower practices such as playing an instrument or listening to one being played could be intentionally retained or revived. As trends change without time to enjoy them, long-lasting trends and timeless ones could be a practical solution for positive change. Note, what is on trend depends on the potential reaction and actual reaction of the masses. Reoccurring past trends, cultural renewal, recalling the past, and present and future innovation are great examples of approaches to combat climate change. Such imaginative returns to the past are often referred to negatively as expressions of nostalgia. There are two types of nostalgia: restorative nostalgia and reflective nostalgia. Restorative nostalgia is wanting things to be as they once were, and reflective nostalgia is memory in the present. Hipsters are modern-day icons of their hybrid reflective and nostalgic style, rediscovering the past and reusing items in a creative engagement with what already exists. Much of these rebellious actions against acceleration are creative, adaptive responses to a complicated lifestyle problem, which are said to be confronted rather than a goal to be achieved. Other approaches to solutions could include DIY solutions or self-sufficiency. As not everyone has to do the same thing and not everyone has the time to thoroughly consider options, a consumer movement and options to buy green created by industry could be an admirable result, as is happening. This makes it easier for the status quo to adopt and then be further encouraged to be informed. We don't need to disengage. We will always be somewhat dependent on consumer culture, but we can choose what we consume and help shape what is available through buying power. An artist and designer's contemporary relevant role can be to revalue, reshape, strengthen and extend what exists through regenerative art and design. They can explore ways of understanding, making, using and experiencing the world of goods, services and environments that do not require destruction of the old, in a future that does not attempt to devalue and erase the past. Hybrid blending of the old and new is a trend and relevant solution in itself and is explored all over the world. The challenge of converting something made redundant into something new and useful for today is an interesting and vitally relevant concern to address as artists and consumers alike. The reuse of so many older things, from whole buildings to interiors, from the restoration of old bicycles and scooters to the sale of vintage clothing and furniture, are all approaches to solutions, with a challenge to create something unique and personal in an otherwise often bland, mass-produced, built and manufactured environment. And that engaging in specific acts of reuse might reduce carbon or save particular virgin materials from measurable energy. Post-retail responsibility is movement within industry being pushed and explored further. This entails the responsibility of the producer in post-retail initiatives, driven by the industries themselves. Industrial scale waste is assessed and considered as value once again. One example is the use of masses of old wooden carpet reused as a newly reformed carpet underlay, and perhaps a wider uptake of in-store take-back schemes may help to re-establish producer awareness of value of product, as consumers will be motivated to consider the resources used and labour involved, diminishing their false understanding and by developing a more custodial relationship with the product. It is important to note that mass-produced items of an inferior quality are less desirable to use in the reuse options. Hopefully, industries are now considering, as designers are now being taught, the inclusion of reuse options in the lifestyle of a product, or that making high-quality products to stand the test of time and incorporating recycled parts is the way forward. This may be resolved over time with consumer-led and industry-led practices. Unfortunately, there is still public disdain for the second-hand market. This might be worth considering and challenging. Recycling with the council and recycling with private businesses, such as collecting and taking soft plastics to your local supermarket, etc., are all great developing strategies to readdress material use. Political consumerism or conscious consumerism refers to the intentional avoidance or purchase of product because of political, social or ethical concerns. The intentional avoidance, boycotting, and the intentional purchase, boycotting, of products constitute a growing form of political behaviour. Large-scale boycotts and boycotts can directly influence corporate policy, corporate personnel, and public opinion. They can even catalyse public policy change. Boycotts can also have financial repercussions. Even the threat of a financial loss can be enough to spur corporate policy change. Some examples of boycotting could be because bad or unethical business practices, inability to take on more environmentally friendly solutions or practices, doesn't recycle, is from further away, products are less durable or don't stand the test of time. Some examples of boycotting could be because shop local, buy local products, is more environmentally friendly, sustainable, biodegradable, ethical, recyclable products and or packaging, low or no packaging, reusable, good quality products is less likely to become outdated quickly or you may lose interest in it. The target for political consumerism is often the corporations, not government. Individuals who engage in political consumerism see it as a personal responsibility to attempt to achieve their goals through putting pressure on private corporations. People are also more likely to boycott or boycott if there is an alternative in stock found in just a convenient place at the same price and quality. So it's clear that there are new values in the use of materials and approaches are being thought about in new ways, like will it be of value in future products, will it break down easily, will it be long lasting, and can it be recycled easily, is it also as low toxicity as possible. Also to note, when the public are affected negatively by industry products and their environmental health safety impacts, they can act and take legal action, protest or petition. So it is an important point to consider now making adjustments to our activities based on the materials we use and how we dispose of them. This can play a significant part in combating climate change. Conclusion. I wish I could conclude this video with more answers, but what I can do instead is create and contribute towards an already existing environment for learning, discussion and action. What is clearly evident is that artists, as well as others, have the power to make a difference, and what happens in the future is down to us. What we have gathered so far is that all humans rely on the environment and natural resources to fulfill our needs and sustain our health. We will continue to be dependent on land and resources to an extent, but now we can and are coming up with more savvy and innovative ways in how we go about it. It is great to see we are now heading into a new phase where we can reconsider what can be made available and how to reuse our already existing materials at hand. It appears that very positive environmental changes are being employed by industries to help combat climate change. Professionals and citizens alike are all adapting in their own unique ways. Much of this is being achieved through education, discussion, understanding, and creating new habits under our new circumstances. The involvement and contribution from the government in playing their part is crucial, and if employed responsibly, could mean that we achieve our environmental goals together in the future. On consumerism. There will be changes to work through, such as the desire for newness and shiny new objects, and what to do about the cycles created by industries to refresh and promote this. What if giving up these cycles is difficult to bear and puts a strain somehow on our livelihoods? Maybe we need to rethink about what will make us happy and where else we can find gratification to replace our consumer pleasures. It is evident that trends can speed up the cycle of newness so much so as to send practical items to landfill prematurely. Trends may also be used to slow things down. Some people's sacrifices may be greater than others, and people reluctant to change may feel the pinch. Either that or they find other solutions and don't change as drastically. What if it isn't so bad and we come up with great solutions and a general consensus to care and feel responsible for our own contribution? Companies adapting to greener options and considering the full cycle of their produce at each stage of the production process is great forward-thinking methodology. On an individual level, becoming aware of recycling methods in your local area and implementing strategies is a great step also. By staying informed and keeping up to date on new solutions to be implemented is a practical and responsible approach to our involvement. It is not about everybody fixing everything at this stage, it is about doing what you can. On art. Creating new habits that become automatic and the norm in practice and considering addressing pro-environmental themes. An interesting objective could be to try to find an idea of a future that's exciting and interesting, something to look forward to, then implement that. To consider yourself as artists who are active participants in society. And as artists are trained in visual culture and idea explorations, we can put our skills to work. An advantage of working in the visual arts is that the limits of what can be achieved are more flexible. We can dream things up, break rules, take risks, speculate, propose actions, all for trial, effect and consideration. The gallery or exhibition space is a great place to get the ball rolling. Utopian ideas of the future, apocalyptic ideas of the future. If we don't act, apocalyptic ideas of the future might be the consequence. The likelihood of councils in urban settings employing a whole heap of extra gardeners to maintain pristine utopian visioned lush immaculate public gardens might not be achievable, but considering this, I've seen some interesting changes. Considering art ideas that won't go out of fashion at a fast pace. As an artist myself, I'm sure we don't want this to happen anyway. We must also think about the influence of our art ideas on the rest of society. Does it mean that some traditions in art come to an end? Maybe not. I hope we can work through things and do what we can to keep disciplines alive. Enriching what we already have might be another way forward. There may be things we have to go through and explore to reach our goals. We don't want to compensate our quality of life. Culture. The hipster movement and current contemporary trends are the result of people already thinking about environmental concerns and our response to it as cultures. It is gathered that there is a tension between science-dominated environmental research and management and cultural understanding and the potential for building bridges. We have also gathered that cultures aren't fixed and can evolve and change from generation to generation. The risk is that completely new cultures can come with completely new cultural wares, which adds to the wasteful society predicament. Solutions revisited. Innovative and ingenious approaches and solutions may well be what will carry us through to resolution. Such examples of this are using plastic as part of or instead of bitumen for roads, reconditioned tyres for various sidewalks and garden beds, plastic and textile fabric combined to make marble-like tiles for interiors, just to name a few. Further thoughts and questions. Some further thoughts and questions I have in relation to what I've learned include: if changes happen while still under a capitalist system, will the government have to have regulations in place to stop the flow back into unhealthy patterns after all the hard work is done? Maybe changes will be so worthy that it won't be worth going back. And what if changes are unrealistic and people might revolt or return to destructive behaviours? So let's not make the future boring or diminish any vibrant and integral existing art disciplines or cultures. Let's make the future an exciting and fulfilling place to live. Keep public discussion going to raise concerns and solve problems together is part of the solution from what I've learned. There are lots of qualified people like us already working to find solutions and fight climate change. It will be interesting to see how it all eventuates. Remember, you can join in with conversation, comment or elaborate on something I have said by tagging Climate Art Debate on Instagram or by commenting in the comment box below. I would love to hear what you have to say to help.